Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So yes, if you've come to the channel to hear Jesus speak through sabotage after they changed my voice, you came to the right place. I'm the most hated person on the planet, on a planet where they claim that I'm the most loved person on the planet. It is insane. Now, how did we get here? Well, part of how we got here has to do with the so-called history of the Jews. The history of the Jews in the Abrahamic faiths is first and foremost figurative. It's metaphorical. It's metaphoric. So the Jews are said to have started with, say, Abraham. Now, some people started with Moses. Well, we'll start with Abraham. It's probably easier to understand that. Matter of fact, let's start it with Noah. So let's start the history of the Jews with Noah. So Noah has 3 children, right? Ham, Shem, and Japheth. They're 3 metaphoric children. They represent the characteristics of groups, the essence of groups, really big groups initially. And then the Bible starts breaking down the subcomponents of those groups. So Noah's righteousness actually passes to Ham. That's what Genesis 10 is about. I speak on this pretty often in my videos, not super often, pretty often. Ham begot Cush. Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod was a mighty warrior before the Lord. Think about somebody being proud of their son, saying, that's my son. That's really my son there. So Nimrod was a real son of God, a real son of Cush, a real son of Ham, a real son of Noah. He was the first person in the Bible to really make God proud. Noah made God proud, but Nimrod really got it. He was a mighty warrior before the Lord. He establishes Babylon. And in doing so, right, he taught, his soldiers how to be a man, how to be a great warrior, what it means to be a true king, a warrior king, to beat anybody in single combat. This is all implied, right? We see that with David and Goliath. That the part of the moral of the story is you have to be a warrior. We see in 2 Samuel 5, when the Jews agreed to make David the king. They say he led Israel on their military missions. Okay, and of course, he faced Goliath in 1 Samuel 17. So by 2 Samuel 5, they're saying, yes, you are the top martial artist set apart by God. Now this gets a bit confusing because as he gets older and he starts relying on his mighty men, it confuses the issue. But anyway, what happens next is the Jews are being taught by this African martial artist, this Hamite, this Cushite named Nimrod, who's now going to make his own faction of Cush. It's pretty straightforward. And Cush you must distinguish between Cush and Mizraim. Mizraim is north of Cush in Africa. It is Egypt. And Cush is below. The more black people of the time are the ones who produced Nimrod. This is very important. And again, I'm not a black supremacist. I'm just telling you the human story correctly and how the Bible, is telling you that I'm right and not all the churches, etc. They don't tell it like this. Except for maybe some Afrocentric churches, but then they throw in twists instead of telling the pure truth, right? Nimrod isn't all black people. Cush isn't all black people. It almost is. Because Mizraim and Cush and Canaan kind of overlap. The simple answer is Ham is a black person. Okay, so all of his children are black. Then there's different migrations of people over time. And the modern day places, Libya, Egypt, Canaan, Israel, Sudan, Ethiopia, on and on and on. These places have changed to some degree because of migration and wars and so on and so forth. Okay, so what happens next? As these African martial artists are teaching people in Babylon and making it great, right? The Lord's a warrior, right? David versus Goliath, Joshua, Jericho. Judges, where God teaches the Israelites warfare. Psalms 18, where God teaches the king, and trains his hands in battle. Moses. It's kind of like magic superimposed on martial arts. So say I had a martial art class, and some of these people were Jews. And keep in mind, back then, according to scientists, according to people with logic, the Jews were basically people of color, one way or another. Whether you believe these people these days who identify as Jews or not, at that point, they're people of color. They come from a place where the dominant reproductive cycle and the people who were the who's who were black. And it was only from there that Abraham starts to understand God's ways. He didn't understand because of some Jews telling him he basically is the progenitor of the Jews. He's an offspring of Shem, but a lot of people are. And Shem and Ham mixed together, but first and foremost, this is part where the disagreement is. There's a bunch of racist people who are from a different patriarchal line than the one God set apart, who want you to think in terms of Jews racially. That's not what it's saying. This is why Nimrod, who was clearly a black person from the line of Ham, taught people who were mostly of color at the time in the area. He taught them God's ways, and according to the Bible, it's said to shift from his flesh-based offspring to his spiritual offspring, which includes Abraham. So now keep in mind that the people in the area in the Middle East they're a very mixed group by the time Abraham is pronounced as the leader of the area. So after Nimrod establishes Babylon, at some point people start misbehaving and a tower is built and people start getting confused. Now, why did they get confused exactly? Well, it goes back to Nimrod. When you think of the Egyptian pyramids, for example, most people forget a very obvious point that the Egyptians didn't forget for a moment, at least in the first dynasty, at least in the Old Kingdom. The pyramids were a symbol of establishing an area in a trade route post. Okay, saying, hey, we built these pyramids and you cannot take this land from us because we are the best martial artists, so we're going to build the biggest structures there. That was the message. They're the best at hand-to-hand combat. They're best at shooting arrows, what have you. Nubians were notorious for how good they were at shooting arrows, and since the Egyptians were right there next to them, it rubbed off on them. So African martial arts, these pyramids are a symbol of the triumph of African martial arts in the trade route area, and how African martial arts civilized the world. And so it was with Babylon and Abraham. His name is even a testament to African patriarchal lines. Abra is a variation of Abba, as I've looked up before in the past, as I've come across that explanation. And Ham refers to Ham. So their spiritual father is Ham. The Bible is about the spiritual martial arts that flowed from God through Nimrod. There was a bunch of martial arts being done by these early guys, but Nimrod really was set apart, like Abraham was set apart. Like it says in Psalm 2, the one God set apart is his very own, the one he chose to lead. According to the Bible, that's what it's saying. But according to everyone with any sense, they know that already. That it's a black patriarchal line that God set apart. And it's a spiritual transference that cannot occur after my flesh dies. So you have to understand this part very well. You have to truly understand it, grasp it, and know it's true. And to know why the Africans are the most spiritual people. Africans, when it comes to the greatest warriors, the top fraction of a % or whatever are Africans, black African people historically, people of black African descent, what have you. Now some of you might say, well, get on with it, right? But you have to understand that. Now when we get to the next phase, what happens? And Abraham, he fights some battles, what have you. You have the situation with Lot. That's not so important. Let's just touch on the very key places where they were trained. So then the Jews at some point, okay, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel, 12 sons, they, because of Joseph, they find their way to Egypt. So now they went from being trained by the black African martial arts system in Babylon to the black African martial arts system that's been continued by a different group to some degree, right? They're mixed. No one quite knows what the exact racial makeup was of the pharaoh at the time or of the governing class in Egypt at the time. But we do know that they were continuing the Egyptians' ways, which are based in the warrior pharaohs, in the falcon warrior tribes who founded Egypt. And making it harder for me to talk because they're jealous. And Set is a deity of jealousy who's associated with the color red. And what happens when white people get in the sun too long? Quite often their skin turns red. And that's a part of red. That's not the only reason he's associated with red, but that's a part of it. It's not because all white people are evil. It's because when evil came into the world to challenge Pharaoh, and its pinnacle, it was foreigners, right? Set's a deity of foreigners. Faux rain ears. Okay? So then they learn the ways of the African martial arts, and it was pronounced in the Bible. If you look it up in the Bible, it says Moses learned the ways of the Egyptians. Why even bother to say that? Why bother to say that? Back when the Old Testament was written, everyone in the area knew damn well. Because if you were going to be great, you had to be associated with black African martial arts. Or else you were a fucking idiot pretending to be great. It was clear as day. So then there's an Exodus where Moses is said to figuratively. Remember, the Bible, the language of the Bible is very figurative. Said in Proverbs 1, the riddles, the parables, the sayings. It's a riddle. What does it mean to split the Red Sea? How did he do that? It's a mystery. It's a riddle. It's connected to the parables. When you look at the meaning of water in the Bible, you see that it is figurative. And so they leave Egypt. And they're wandering. Why? Why are they wandering? Think about it. Why are they wandering? Because the African martial arts spirit cycle was broken when a cruel pharaoh came into power who did not know what he was doing. That's the argument the Bible's making. Maybe they're being too gracious to the pharaoh who elevated Joseph. But that's the argument that it's making. So now they're like, who are we? Where are we going? Moses is like, I think I know where I'm going. I think, and he's following God, and they're wandering through the wilderness. And eventually, they find their way to Canaan, and it becomes Israel. So you have to understand these things and how they pertain to dating, how they pertain to the failed economy. Why has the economy failed? Because they're not using a black African martial arts system from God, the one true system from God. They're using a Roman system. We'll get to that. And they're using a Judeo-Roman system, not Judeo-Christian in the sense of serving God and Christ, me. It's a Judeo-Roman system, and Romans like to pretend that they are on your side. Whether it was, the Gauls, whether it was the Germans, whoever it was, they pretended they were on their side. And they stab them in the back. And they stab each other in the back. They stab Caesar in the back. They are a very Judas group of people historically. No offense to anyone. These are the facts. They throw their own in the Colosseum, feed them to the lions at the drop of a hat, at the blink of an eye. Okay. So then over time, the Persians or, the book of Esther, what have you. Okay. And then where do they go back? Where does the Old Testament end? Right? Malachi. Where does it end? It ends in Babylonian captivity. That's what Jeremiah is about, Isaiah. It's talking about these Babylonians, these Assyrians, right? They're up to no good. And they end in Babylonian captivity. And Assyria and Babylon go hand in hand. So it may as well be one and the same. Now, where does the New Testament end? It ends in Roman captivity. So if you're still under the auspices of Rome, if you're still run by Rome, you're in hot water. Now, where are you and where do you need to be? You need to be in the African system. If you don't understand that, watch this video again. Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod was a mighty warrior for the Lord. God said, I set you apart. Amos 9:7, are you not the same as the Cushites unto me, O children of Israel? Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod was a mighty warrior, a mighty hunter of beasts, of mark of the beast punks before the Lord. Now again, if you're not paying attention, pay attention. Spiritual transference is key here. It cannot be done after my flesh dies. This is the end. And the divine verdict is with me. No one can overrule that. Who are they to try to overrule it? No one can surpass me. How can you say, hey, this guy was the top martial artist ever possible, and he said this? But I think the answer is this. It's stupid. It's over after my flesh dies. Understand why. So if you were alive during the time of Rome, and you heard the story, and you're from somewhere else, and you say, well, why did this Roman system allow for these fucking idiots to crucify the Son of God? Why do they listen to these hateful Jews who are like, look, he's only half Jewish. He's half something else. So crucify him already. We have our ways. Why did they act like bitches? You got to understand the nuances of the story, where it matters most. Not insignificant details, significant details. The Romans and the Jews, as the vast majority of them in the same spirit, killed Jesus. Those in the story who were obeying Jesus didn't kill Jesus. Most of you get that, but you don't truly appreciate the significance. What is the symbolism here? Was it the Philistines by themselves? Certainly the Rome had assimilated a certain amount of Philistines. That's significant too. Was it, Ethiopians? Was it, Chinese? Who killed Jesus? And why? And perhaps more importantly, when you look at this story, who won? The guy who lived a shorter righteous life, or Herod? And Weasel Herod, or Pilate, or Caesar? Who were you better off being? When you look at the story, you say, hey, you don't want to be persecuted. You want to be a Roman bitch. You're like, I'm somebody's Jewish bitch. Okay? Or did you want to, if you were there in the story, would you want to serve Christ? Nobody right now, except for me, truly understands the moral of the story. Because you're like reliving the story. There's nothing new under the sun. As they say, except for after my flesh dies, then there's no sun in that sense. You're starting to understand now why everyone's so damn stupid. They're like a dumb Roman dog. Like, hey, guys, we do it again, huh? Am I right, guys? My fucking idiots. And when you look at what's going on in, say, Palestine, people in the neo-Roman system, right? NATO and neo-Roman are connected. Not necessarily the wordplay, but I'm sure the wordplay too, if you took the time to do it. And the descendants of those who killed the prophets in the story, figuratively speaking with metaphors, what have you, are killing people again for being more like the prophets than they are. Pretty straightforward. Just yesterday I saw this video about, it was a pretty kind-seeming Jewish female. I mean, she was a hypocrite. She believed the Luciferian fairy tale BS version of the Bible, but she's reading the Bible, the Old Testament. I believe she's in Jerusalem. A bunch of Jews are passing by her. And there's a bunch of videos like this out there. Maybe the white man is scapegoating. It's not clear why they allow that to be put out there, while people go on and on about not being anti-Semitic. And they're acting like immature satanic witches, giving her weird looks, mocking her, making some weird frat face. It looks so stupid, so dumb, so disgraceful, so petty, so childish, so full of folly. And as you look at it, you see there's a difference between her and them. They're all Satanists. She's a Satanist too. She's a Luciferian-themed Satanist, right? Fairy fake. She thinks that people should act like, a pixie princess or My Little Pony or some bitch-ass fucking shit when talking about God. And her dating judgment is the same as her so-called religious judgment. She would date some fairy emo pussy-ass motherfucking bitch when Exodus 15:3 says the Lord is the warrior. Pretty straightforward. And those are part of the spirits that killed the possibility of connecting to Christ in the story, which is what the crucifixion of Christ represents. And the resurrection represents spiritual transference, which again is not going to happen after my flesh dies. And people connecting to the Spirit through those who were still in the divine order, who followed orders. Said John 15, Luke 6:46, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Pretty straightforward. I'm going way over time, but you should see what I'm saying. The Jews, in a sense, represent people who are righteous, who are loyal to God and humanity in the story. And keep in mind, again, a lot of people don't see the nuance there. The Jews are a very diverse people, still really, but at the time, but a little bit less diverse in some ways because there's certain satanic cults that are spreading their genes more. They believe in King Solomon's have a zillion kids path instead of a path of virtue and having meaningful relationships, loving relationships, what have you. And of course, the whole world has gone astray, right? It's not just the Jews making terrible and horrible and unforgivable mistakes. Okay. So again, you probably won't believe me about what just happened. I mean, you probably will because you know I'm an honest person. Some Jewish gentleman just drove up and at first I'm looking, I'm like, okay, what is this about? What is he going to hassle me about, you know? And he says that he's in between jobs, he's got to make it to Gilroy, he's on E, and he just needs $5, what have you. And so, you know, I decided to give him the money even though I know that when I give strangers money these days, homeless people, they do something funny and, you know, it messes up my body, what have you, but I'm a very compassionate person, so you know, I'm in the middle of making this video, and I'm almost out of, I remember on my phone, so let me just wrap this up here. And so, you know, right, I pull out the money, I go to give it to him. A black guy walks up to him, he has his check, he's like, I'm about to get the money for you right now, what have you. And he's like, you got him? And I'm like, yeah. And he says, okay, you guys are the most generous people. And the other guy was black too, right? Yeah, you know, very, very straight. I'm not racist. I'm mad about the injustices that happen, what have you. Again, I judge people as individuals. It's sad that things came to this in the world. People kept rebelling. You know, at times, when you're in my shoes, if you were in my shoes, that is, you'd want to kind of, it's like you want to help people. That's part of why I'm still alive right now, instead of having given up or something, is I'm not giving up on God, but giving up on mankind in one way or another. Found my way out of this planet is that, you know, it's like you want to help people when you're a good person, but justice has to come before kindness and mercy and so on and so forth, right? So there's that. I'm a really nice guy, you know. A lot of times you see my videos, I'm very angry person, okay, because it's righteous indignation, it's moral outrage. I'm going way over time here, and I gotta pick up where I left off, wrap this video up, so let's just wrap this up here. Yeah, so now I want to go on about what those mistakes are, and talk about my war on poverty plan, etc., etc., but I'm out of memory on my phone, so I'm going to wrap up this video. It is very sad how people are treated, how society doesn't want to scramble. If everyone did the right thing and be in everyone's best interest, they'd ask themselves, why didn't they do that before? Even the most mentally ill people, you know, would work with them, I'd work with them, they'd eventually see their mistake. Very few of them would be crazy enough to not see their mistake when I point out the facts here. Okay, so I think the responsible thing to do is to highlight that Abraham means I will create many, or I'm the founder of many, or the father of many nations. But it's not that simple, because these words have more than one meaning. Okay, so Abraham also means father, Ham, and according to at least one side, it can also mean mother, starting from Ham. And that has a lot to do with how sought after certain African traits are, right? The shape of the body, the lips, various things, right? And especially when you mix with people like in the Middle East. Okay, so Abraham means basically that a certain group of people, you might say the Jews, what have you, okay, Jupiter and Juno, right? Zeus and the rape of Europa, that they're trying to be the patriarchal lines of many nations, okay, and that they founded. And when you look at the founding fathers, okay, and you talk about Judeo-Christian culture, to make a long story short, whites, Jews, and LGBT people, okay, you might say the emphasis is on Jews. I don't know who exactly at the top level is doing it, but it's white, Jews, and LGBT. They're trying to be the patriarchal lines of many nations and the who's who and so on and so forth. And so that's how they interpret Abraham. But that's kind of like the devil's interpretation, right? That's why it says Satan is the god of this world. Okay? And keep in mind that I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not racist. Everyone should stop reproducing no matter what. You all know what kind of people are disproportionately rich. You all know these things. And it's stupid to play stupid about them and their implications. You have to make up your mind, and you should rally and obey God. To me, that's the right thing to do. Okay. So absolutely, Abraham, like I was saying earlier, is a reference to the African martial art order, being the order of God. Okay. And those who are outside the gates, those who keep reproducing, those who cheat me on my right to lead, by their actions, they're the children of Cain, refusing to honor God's decision and screening out the righteous one way or another. Thank you. Oh yeah, see Isaiah 57 if you don't believe me. Okay, so really quickly, in regards to the name Abraham, first of all, Hebrew is a language that must have changed. Okay, for example, Abraham didn't necessarily speak Hebrew, right? He lived in Babylon. He lived in Ur, Chaldea, part of Babylon. And he spoke the language of the area. Hebrew must be something that came after that, at least when it comes to the name Abraham, we have to look at it that way. So what did the name Abraham mean to Abraham versus what does it mean to someone who's worldly? That's a huge part of this. And so when we look at this story and we ask ourselves, what's the reality of this story? Like, for example, in America, they're not giving me my rightful place. It's a corrupt system because there's a critical mass of rebels and people who are afraid to face rebels. And when all is said and done, they refuse to tell things correctly and to define things correctly. We see it in mental health. We see it in politics. We see it in religion. We see it in dating. How they define a logical dating scale is an abomination to God. And so it is with how they define Abraham's name. So there's all kinds of occultists who interpret it in a very sick way, very childish way. Some of these people are even child molesters. So you have to ask yourself, what is the true meaning? And once you ask yourself that, you see that I'm right.